good afternoon from Cottage Farmstead. We haven't met before. I'm Rebecca. And as the clouds are starting to build outside, it looks like we're going to get some rain. I thought I'd take a little bit of time and sit down and talk to you about the costs of raising meat birds. So this is our second year raising meat birds. Last year we raised the barred rock breed because we wanted to have a heritage breed that was also good for meat. So we were purchasing the heritage breed and also butchering the excess roosters. So that's all we really did last year, and we didn't keep a whole lot of records of how much it cost to raise them, as we knew we were keeping a lot of them on as some extra laying hens and also for hatching eggs. But this year we determined that we were going to keep track of how much it costs to raise a dozen meat birds from start to finish, so that we could share that math with you, so that you could determine if raising meat birds is a good fit for your homestead or not. So I'll be referencing my notes and math here on the computer in a minute, but first I want to give you a little background on how it went for us raising meat birds this year. So this is our first year raising a meat-specific breed. We purchased 12 red broilers from McMurray Hatchery, as well as a couple layer chicks that we tossed in there to replenish our laying hen flock. And they grew exponentially faster. It was amazing to see how much more quickly they grew, how much they ate. And they were indeed ready to butcher at 12 weeks as it was advertised on their website. So that was fantastic. Unfortunately, we lost 5 of our meat birds within 2 to 3 weeks of our butcher date, as we did have a very intense heat dome and heat wave, and it was heat index of over 100 degrees here for weeks on end, and meat birds do not do very well in such intense heat and humidity that we had here in South Carolina. While it is unusual for us to have such intense heat in June, it was definitely a risk to try and butcher meat birds this late into the summer in South Carolina. So in future years, we are definitely planning on getting meat-specific breeds earlier in the spring so that we're able to butcher them before the intense heat arrives. But first, let's talk expenses of raising 12 meat birds start to finish. I will talk a bit in a minute about how much it cost us to lose those 5 meat birds. But let's just assume all 12 of them survived to our butcher date. So your first expense is definitely going to be your feed. For us, we were paying for a bag of feed that was $18.99, and it would have taken us 5 bags to get all 12 to maturity. So that is $94.95 for just the feed. Then we also did have them inside for a couple of weeks, so we were using pine shavings in our brooder box. And that is $6.99 per bag, and we went through 2 bags, so that's almost $14 for our pine shavings. We did have to invest in a new feeder because these chicks ate so much that the usual classic feeder that you have in the mason jar was not sufficient. We were having to fill that too many times a day, so we bought a larger feeder for them. The 12 chicks themselves were $48.48 from the hatchery. And so just the expenses of the supplies, it was $167.40. One thing that Farmer Nathan and I do try to keep in mind, though, is does it make sense for us to even invest our time into something like this? So I did factor in a little bit of labor costs into raising our meat birds. So on average, it was about 15 minutes a day over the course of 84 days, which is about 21 hours, that we invested in raising these meat birds. And then on butcher day, if we had done all 12, for butchering and packaging, it would have been about 4 hours worth of labor. So we're looking at about 25 hours worth of labor going into these meat birds. Just for this example, I am charging $10 an hour for our labor, but you can charge whatever you think your time is worth as far as raising the chickens go. So if I include the labor cost in there for all 12 meat birds, it would have been $417.40 just to raise the meat birds. To determine if we actually saved money, lost money, or just broke even, I went and looked at the local meat prices for chicken in our area from a couple different local farms for whole birds and parted out birds, so leg quarters, breasts, that sort of thing, to get an idea of how much it would have cost for us to purchase the amount of meat that we got from the meat birds. So we kept 2 of our birds whole, and in our area, whole birds go for $6.50 a pound. Chicken breasts are about $11 for a 1-pound pack of them. Tenderloins are about $12 to $13 a pack. I just did on the lower end, $12. If you want the frames or the carcasses for broth, those go for about $18 each in our area. And leg quarter packs go for about $10 to $12 per area. So I'm estimating a little bit on the lower side just to be generous. We weren't feeding a particularly expensive organic feed to our chickens, so I'm estimating on the lower side for our local meat prices here. So tallying it all up, if we purchased all of this meat, it would have been $477.80. So we ended up netting about $60.40 when you subtract out our expenses for raising the 12 meat birds. So we saved about $5 per bird. So we very nearly broke even on raising 12 meat birds from start to finish. But like I mentioned earlier, we did lose 5 of our meat birds, and it proves that economy of scale is very important if you are going to raise meat birds for yourself. Is if you raise too few meat birds and you put all of this labor and expense into it, you are probably going to end up losing money while raising your meat birds. So let's look at what it cost us to lose those 5 meat birds towards the end of raising them. Because we lost those 5 birds, we did consume a little bit less feed, and it ended up being about 4.5 bags of feed. So that was $85.45. We still had already invested in the pine shavings and the new feeder, and we had paid for the 12 chicks already. And our labor time didn't change. We're still feeding the feeder and the waterers the same amount of time per day. We were still cleaning the brooder box the same amount of time when they were chicks, so all of the labor expenses are still the same in there. So with dropping down to 7 meat birds, the total expenses just for the supplies would have been $157.90. If we add our labor in there, it would be $407.90. Now going into the meat costs of chicken in our area for just the 7 birds, we still had the same amount of whole birds. We kept 2 of them whole, but we obviously had 4 less chicken breast packages, we had 2 less tenderloin packages, we had 4 less carcasses, and we had 4 less leg quarter packets. So when you tally up everything that it would have cost us to purchase the meat, it would have been $297.80. When you subtract out the expenses, including our labor, we netted a negative $110.10. So by losing those 5 birds, we lost out on $170.50 worth of savings on our meat birds. So that averages out to be about $34 per lost bird. So this is a costly mistake that we are definitely not planning on repeating in future years. We have learned our lesson, and we are not going to try and raise meat birds in the heat of a southern summer again. But this also proves that economy of scale is important if you are going to raise meat birds for your family. If you're only wanting to do maybe 10 meat birds, you're probably not going to even break even on raising your meat birds. If you're looking to actually save money on raising meat birds as a way to feed your family quality food less expensively, you are going to want to start hitting the dozen or more meat birds per year to take advantage of the fact that the labor that it takes to raise 10 meat birds and 25 meat birds is not really a whole lot different. And similarly, once you factor in all the setup that goes into butchering the chickens, adding a few more to the butchering process also gets the cost of each bird down as well. So doing a handful per year is not going to be ideal if you are looking to save money on your grocery bill, as you are probably going to be losing money. Well, I hope you found this video helpful on learning a little bit about meat chicken math and the costs of raising meat birds here in the southern United States. I hope it helped you determine if it is worthwhile for you to raise meat birds on your homestead. We don't mean to discourage you, but if you're wanting to raise quality meat for your family and save money at the same time, to make sure to keep in mind that there is an economy of scale and to make sure that you're raising enough meat birds for it to make economic sense for your family. And with that, I'll catch you next time.